Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your quiet neighborhood isn't as peaceful as it looks because someone, somewhere, has been watching your every move. That's exactly what happened to me the day I got caught in an HOA sting operation. And trust me, nothing prepares you for the moment you discover your own home has been under silent surveillance. It started with tiny signs, neighbors whispering, cars slowing down near my driveway, and board members giving me smiles that felt way too rehearsed. I didn't know it yet, but I was walking straight into a setup designed to catch me in the act of a rule I didn't even know existed. And just when I thought it was all in my head, everything suddenly snapped into place. But what I didn't know was that the HOA had already made their move. It all began a week earlier when I put out a new set of solar string lights in my backyard, thinking it would add a cozy vibe for weekend gatherings. Little did I know, my neighborhood's HOA had a strict, almost ridiculous policy that prohibited unapproved decorative illumination devices. Yes, those exact words. I didn't even think to check the handbook, mostly because it was 43 pages long and written like a legal contract. But the moment those lights flickered on, the HOA's internal radar must have gone off like a fire alarm. I noticed unfamiliar men walking their dogs past my house, except the dogs didn't look like they wanted to be there, and the men kept glancing at my yard, pretending not to stare. What I didn't know was that these weren't neighbors. They were HOA volunteers gathering evidence. A few days later, things got even stranger. I started receiving anonymous notes on my porch. Short messages like, check your compliance, or some rules aren't meant to be broken. They were typed, no signature, no sender, just small reminders that someone was tracking something. I laughed it off at first, assuming it was some neighbor's idea of a joke. But then I noticed one of the HOA board members slowly circling my street in his golf cart at the same time every evening, like clockwork, always slowing down just a little longer in front of my house. Even then, I didn't suspect a sting operation, just paranoia creeping in. But the truth was, the HOA was just waiting for me to slip. Then came the night everything unfolded. I stepped outside to adjust one of the light strands because it had fallen due to the wind. The second I reached up, motion sensor floodlights from across the street blasted on, almost blinding me. At first, I thought it was just someone coming home, but then 3 people stepped out of the shadows with clipboards, cameras, and printed copies of the HOA guidelines. It felt like I was being raided, except instead of police uniforms, they were wearing matching polo shirts with the HOA emblem stitched on the chest. One of them announced, in the most dramatic tone possible, "We have documented repeated violations." I stood there, still holding the light bulb, wondering if this was real life or a bad sitcom. But the real shock was what happened next. Instead of handing me a warning or talking to me like a normal human being, they told me they had been conducting a compliance observation initiative, basically a polite way of saying sting operation. Apparently, they had been taking pictures, recording times, noting dates, and even logging when the lights were turned on and off. They had surveillance logs thicker than a detective's case file, all centered around my $15 solar lights. I couldn't even respond. I was too busy processing the fact that the HOA had spent actual time and manpower building a case against me. They presented a fine, a mandatory compliance meeting notice, and even a suggestion to remove any future unauthorized decor. But nothing could prepare me for the twist that came after. One of the volunteers, who'd been quiet the entire time, stepped forward and whispered that he didn't agree with any of this, but the board was becoming more extreme and wanted to make an example out of someone. And lucky me, I was the chosen one. He admitted the HOA had been looking for a reason to tighten the rules and needed a test case. My lights were just the excuse they needed. The sting wasn't really about compliance, it was about establishing control. Suddenly, everything made sense. The strange notes, the odd surveillance, the golf cart patrols. I wasn't just a resident anymore. I was part of their strategy. And that's when I realized I wasn't going to let this be the end of the story. I took the case to the next community meeting, but not quietly. I printed their surveillance photos, gathered signatures from neighbors who were tired of the HOA overreach, and exposed the entire operation in front of the board and residents. People were shocked, some were angry, others embarrassed. The board tried to defend their actions, but when I asked them if they really believe conducting a sting over backyard lights was reasonable, the room went silent. Even the board members couldn't justify it. The community began demanding change, and within weeks, 2 board members resigned and several rules were rewritten, including the one about lighting. The sting operation backfired on them spectacularly. And that's how I turned an HOA trap into a neighborhood wake-up call.